we'll be talking about the covert female narcissist. I'll be welcoming a guest onto the show called Jon. Hope we're going to receive a lot of insight into this, particularly for men as well, and also women that can also benefit in some teaching. Hi, I just want to welcome you onto the show, Jon. It's a pleasure to have you on today. How are you doing?
Doing really well. Thank you so much for having me today.
Yeah, fantastic. It's been a pleasure. It's been a long time coming, so I'm so glad you're on today, finally. I'd just like to briefly introduce Jon Mckenney. He's been in a 27-year narcissistic abusive marriage. And I believe one of the most powerful ways for people to learn is from people that have real life, authentic experiences. So they're able to relate in depth with their experiences. And so people can also learn and protect themselves. So I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that, Jon, in terms of your background and your journey and how you've come here today, basically. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, you know, it was quite a ride, and it was a process of discovery for me. As you and I were talking about offline before here, you know, I spent so many of my years in the ministry. I worked in the church and was no stranger to counseling. I was no stranger to hurting people and to working them through life situations. And here I was in the middle of my own, struggling in the worst of ways, trying to make my marriage work, and ultimately was not able to do that. And the process of discovering what was really taking place was excruciating and beneficial all at the same time.
Wow.
So it's been quite a ride, and I hope that in the days ahead, particularly for men, and we should probably say this up front, although you know I speak with a male's voice, this can happen to anybody. I've chosen to try to reach men because they seem to be underrepresented in the narcissistic abuse circles, for whatever reason. Statistically speaking, narcissism is indiscriminate. Most of the material I've read says it's about 50-50 men and women.
Yeah.
And yet about 95% of the material written about narcissistic abuse is written by women about men. So I hope that what I do is in some respects the great equalizer, and it sheds light on this for men who I really believe are mired in this as well, and ultimately just they don't even know, like I didn't know. So that's my story, and we'll tell more here in the moments ahead, but that's where I'm coming from.
Yeah, and I'm so glad you touched on that point, Jon, and I believe that's really important, what you just said. And I believe is even something I mentioned perhaps on some previous episodes for whatever reasons, because men are not immune to this sort of abuse. And, you know, like you said, there's an underrepresentation. I believe it's really important as well in order to reach out to certain men that for whatever reasons, we know how men can be. We might have egos or like, you know, pressures of society as well. Oh, men should not cry, you know, the alpha, you know, male type, you know, just take on, you know, the pressures of life that men, I mean, like, the thing is, men can get depressed as well. There's statistics, you know, to prove that, you know, there are men that do get depressed, that do potentially commit suicide. And these are part of the issues. These are part of the issues and the root causes that we need to get to. So I'm just so glad that, you know, using the opportunity. And I believe that's also really powerful, like the point that you made that, you know, being in your previous background as a pastor, I mean, that just goes to show that no one is absolutely like, this is a concept that some people might be ignorant about, and no one, absolutely no one is immune to this kind of abuse. It doesn't, just because you're a pastor or anything, it doesn't make you like an elite that, you know, happen to you. Do you know what I mean? So
absolutely. And at the same time, you know, it's something that pastors and people in the spiritual communities also need to be aware of. Unfortunately, the church I was a part of did not respond to me well at all. and as is so
Yeah.
typical of some of these situations where narcissists they lie so much. We call it gaslighting in
Yeah.
narcissist
Gaslighting.
circles, but
Yeah.
it's essentially pathological lying.
Yeah.
And the spiritual community is also not used to dealing with this in any kind of way unless they've seen it. And my church did not respond well to me as I was going through this process, and it wound up being very hurtful. But that doesn't change my belief in the Lord. So
Yeah, of course.
you know, it just is. But it needs to be, the spiritual community needs to wake up to these things as well, and needs to learn how to respond appropriately when people are hurting men or women from this kind of abuse.
Yeah, definitely. Really great point. And it's one of the reasons why I'm equally so passionate about this topic. And, even to hear that from you, Jon, I mean, I believe right now there's a gaining momentum of awareness in the Western world, as opposed to even the continent in Africa. There's still kind of like a gaining momentum of pace of people being aware of just, taking into consideration like mental health and its importance. And to even hear that from you in the Western world, that, you weren't even taking that seriously. So that's a really important point for us to like really focus on, this topic. So absolutely, mate. So I just think, because there's so many, like the topic today is, specifically, I mean, we know it can come from a male or a female, but specifically for today is the covert female narcissist, which I believe, can be even more dangerous than the overt narcissist, because at least that one's in your face and you can identify with it. But the covert, I believe, can be so dangerous because it can be more deceitful. They can come across, especially really beautiful women that are charming.
Absolutely.
We men, we're moved by looks at the end of the day. Let's put it that way. So I think maybe we can even start from there, like the charming nature of the covert female narcissist. I mean, what
absolutely
about that?
Interestingly enough, and speaking from my own experience, and what you described here, I think is spot on. The malignant narcissist, you can spot across the room, and anybody can spot them across the room, given about 5 minutes time. You can tell there's something wrong. And what's interesting about that is that that there's commonality. The malignant narcissist kind of stands by themselves, and everybody around them knows that they're a narcissist. And the covert is charming, and my ex is charming, well liked, well respected in the community. She is a churchgoer. She reads her Bible. She is actively involved, and people think she walks on water. And at home, in her private world, she couldn't tell the truth to save her. Which is fascinating, because what that does is it puts the victim by themselves instead of the narcissist by themselves. Their public persona is so believable that when the victim comes forward and starts to talk about these things, and quite honestly, I think many of these victims don't, because they don't want to tarnish the reputation of a spouse or of a lover or significant other in some kind of way. And I was in that camp for many years. I didn't want to tarnish her reputation. I thought, okay, this is something we can deal with privately. And ultimately it was unfixable, no matter how much truth entered the conversation or the situation. So the covert particularly leaves the victim on their own. They're the only ones, perhaps. Sometimes it's a spouse, or sometimes it's a spouse and children are the ones who see this. In my situation, at this point in time, my kids don't understand what's taken place. They do, and they're adult children, and which is why, at this point in time, I don't show my face here, because ultimately I don't want to hurt them, and and we're working on relationship and this might. So I've chosen not to show my face, otherwise there wouldn't be issue here. But in my situation, this was all going on behind the scenes. My kids have no idea. The church community has no idea. The friends around us have no idea, and had no idea for a very long time, until I couldn't deal with the situation anymore. It became intolerable around the house. And I myself, as a pastor, was going, okay, till death do us part, is what I promised. If this is what the future looks like, then I volunteer for the death part, which is a very scary and frightening place to be.
Wow.
It's horrific. So through this process of discovering, what was taking place, I was really out on my own, and some of it sounds so outlandish when you talk about the stories that take place. There's this cognitive dissonance between the people that know and love her and my world. I would talk to some of my closer friends, and I would say, hey, well, this happened. For example, she pretended to have cancer. And they're surely not. That's just not possible. And I'm like, yes, these things, this took place. On top of that, if you happen to sit in front of a therapist, therapists are not so well trained in dealing with covert narcissists as well. In fact, they're not well trained in dealing with narcissists.
Yeah, definitely. Especially if they're like gaslighting the actual therapist.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
I took my ex to quite a few therapists before I discovered somebody who was a specific narcissist therapist, and was actually, in fact, she worked more with women than she worked more with male victims than she worked with female victims, believe it or not. And she was able to help me, and that was a godsend in her entering my situation. Because I'd seen other therapists who couldn't identify the problem. They would just look at her and go, something's wrong, I don't know what to do, you just need to leave her. And these were therapists who would call themselves Christians and don't believe in divorce. So when you hear those kinds of things, it's a wake-up call for sure. But they were of no help to me whatsoever, other than to say, okay, leave her, which I didn't, at least at the time, I didn't want to do, because divorce is not my way either.
Sure.
So getting help is a problem. Sometimes the covert narcissist is so believable that they tell these half-truths to the therapist, and the therapist will then pile on the victim as well, making it even more difficult for them. And I have to say that I do think men are less believable. If you do have a therapist that perhaps has an understanding of narcissism or even covert narcissism, men just don't seem to be as believable in our world. And I think that's more cultural, as you've kind of mentioned, than anything else.
It's society. And
the ridiculousness of some of the stories don't help either. So,
I can just imagine, and that's just that situation that you even described is so tricky, and it's kind of scary in a way, because it's like, if you're put in such a delicate situation like that, and especially like, it makes it seem almost as if like, how would one now have the discernment? Would one now have to rely on your spiritual discernment to be able to like know that, okay, look, this is the situation? Because that honestly is a very, very tricky situation.
It really is. I mean, in some respects, and I don't envy marriage therapists in any way, shape, or form, because if one person is lying, you cannot help them. And therapy only works when somebody is honest. You can send somebody to a therapist, as I did my ex. In fact, I thought she just had problems. She had issues with men from prior to us having been married. So I thought, you know what, I need to go send her to a therapist and and let her go and give her the freedom to go explore these things on her own without me in the room. And we did this for years, and she wasn't getting any better. And at one point in time, I said to her, "So are you being honest with the therapist?"
Yeah.
And she goes, "Well, no." She said, I'm kind of telling her, I'm telling the therapist what she wants to hear, so she thinks that there's nothing wrong with me."
Wow, she actually admitted that to you. Wow.
She admitted that to me. So there's this level of understanding they have of their actions in some respects, and at the same time, she would say, well, her words to her therapist, she goes, "Well, I live with a husband who's just very angry." And that was her mantra, which is true. I was angry, but she left out the other 99%, which is I was constantly being lied to. She had an emotional obsession with another man and refused to own the fact that she'd had this. In fact, pretended that it never occurred after she confessed it.
Yeah, that's emotional cheating. Yeah. And
yeah, it is.
I think that level of, like you said, she was honest with you. I think that level of kind of like half truths or half transparency can also leave you in a form of confusion as well, in a relatable way.
Oh, yes.
It's like, well, they're being transparent, but it's not the full story. So if you're not telling the full story, it can still be classed as a lie. Because,
no question.
The
best lie is filled with 99% truth. When I was a kid, there was a soap company here in the United States called Dove. No, it was Ivory Soap, and they're still in business. And their television commercials were all the same. It showed a baby in the bathtub or a baby being cleaned with this Ivory Soap, and it would say 99.some% pure. And my dad, when that commercial came in, I remember one time he said, "Yeah, but if that other 0.5% is the wrong thing, it'll kill you." And the same is true of the deception that a covert narcissist will tell. They will tell a 99% truth and eliminate the very deadly thing that is
deadly. Wow, that's powerful. That's powerful, and even an insight for me, because that was relatable in the sense that level of transparency made me think, oh well, this is a trustworthy person. Like, they've been transparent, but when you realize that, okay, they're leaving out parts of this, then it's a whole new different ballgame. So
it really is.
Yeah. And
confronting them with truth is irrelevant. They, ultimately,
defensive.
I feel like, I spent 27 years trying to hold up a mirror in front of her saying, look at what you're doing, look at who you are, look at what you're saying, and hoping that her belief in Jesus and her faith and her seeming sense of morality would prevail, and she would go, this isn't the way a person should act. And ultimately what I discovered was that there was absolutely no internal compass or internal conscience whatsoever.
They have no moral compass. That's something I eventually had to learn.
Yeah.
There's no moral compass, so it's,
well, there is a moral compass for everybody else, but except them. They're very quick to judge your behavior, and they get an idea in mind in how they would like for something to go, and what is fair and what is not, which was excruciatingly problematic with our children. And they get an idea in their head, they chase it down, whether it makes sense or not, and it's very difficult to move them from that place. In fact, I have to tell you, there are probably some people who are married to a narcissist who don't go toe to toe with their spouse.
Yeah.
I was the man in the family, so and did not back down from truth. Was not afraid to have conversations. I felt like that was my responsibility as a Christian husband to lead and to guide in all truth. But some people don't want to be led. and I feel for women in a situation with a male narcissist, because it might be a very physically intimidating situation where I didn't have that problem. I was able to have these conversations. They just didn't go anywhere. They wound up being irrelevant. In fact, we could come to a conclusion after 2 hours of fighting. And at this point in time, I think she was just tired of fighting. So she'd go, all right, I'm going to go do this. And then turn around the next day and go do the very thing she said she wasn't going to go do. And when I go, what happened here? She go, I don't know what you're talking about. We didn't ever have a conversation about that.
Oh my God, that's the gaslighting and honestly the distortion of your reality. And
it is.
When you
it makes you crazy.
Yeah. When you begin, go on.
Yeah, I'll give you another example. I sought some counsel from our pastor.
Yeah.
And in the session, the first half, we met with him for about an hour. Yeah. And during the first half of the session, I only spoke one phrase and the same phrase over and over again. Will you please tell this man the truth? 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 That is not true. Will you please tell this man the truth? And about 3/4 of the way through the thing, at least he seemed in the moment to have some perspective on her. Wow. And he asked a very insightful question, one that I didn't anticipate, but ultimately I'm grateful he asked. He looked over at her and he said, so I have a question for you. So it seems as though some of your issues here were pre-marriage and that you're dealing with baggage from your past. And he said, let me ask you a question. He said, did you ever love your husband? And she said, no, I never really did love him like I should. And of course, I'm on the other side of the room going, oh my, dear God, my whole marriage is a sham. This is probably 25 years in. My whole marriage is a sham, and I am devastated on the other side of the room.
Wow.
And he looked over at her and he said, then your marriage will be fixed when you learn to love your husband the way you were meant to love him. And the session ended a couple of minutes later and kind of ended right there. And we got home, and the trip home was silent, and we had dinner with the children. And later, when it was quiet and it was just the two of us, I said, I just want you to know it was very hard to hear what you told our pastor today. She goes, well, what did I tell him? And I said, well, you told him that you'd never loved me. She said, oh, I didn't say that. I said, he asked you the question, did you ever love me? And your exact response was, no, I never really loved him like I should. She goes, oh, I never said that. So not only did she speak it to me, but then she pretended it never happened. And you're left going, wait a minute, did my pastor ask that question? Did he say that? Did she respond to him that way? And you have to go back and you have to question your memory. And if that kind of thing happens enough to you, you wind up thinking you're going crazy because they're constantly lying about what's taking place.
Yeah.
I tell a story sometimes. I like old cars, and there's a particular kind of car I do like. And I was with some friends one time, and we were going to the movies. And as we walked up towards the movie theater, there was one of those cars sitting right there. And it was this beautiful green metallic color. And as I walked up, I said to my one buddy, I said, look at that car. I ran over to it. I said, look at this car, it's just beautiful. What a beautiful metallic green color. And he goes, that car is beige. And I said, that car is green. I'm standing here right in front of it. It is metallic, like a lime metallic green. He says, that car is beige. I said, you're out of your mind. That car is green. No, that car is beige. So now I'm beginning to question myself a little bit because this is one of my best friends and it doesn't seem as though he's pulling my leg. So I thought, all right, in the council of many, the truth is discovered. So I asked my other friend, Scott. I said, so Scott, what color is that car? And he says, it's beige. You guys are out of your mind. And now I'm really beginning to question myself. I said, I can't explain this. I'm like, I see this car green. These guys see this car as beige, and I don't get it. And as we walk up and take a couple of steps closer to the movie theater, I'm thinking I'm crazy. And Scott is starting to chuckle. And I'm like, what is going on here? He says, well, he goes, in full disclosure, I am colorblind, red-green deficient. So I would see something that was green as beige. And my other friend looked over at me and he said, yeah, I'm colorblind too. So I'm trying to identify truth, trying to find truth. And here are two men with some kind of deficiency that ultimately, because there were two of them, unusual situation with the same color blindness, you couldn't discover the truth. And in that moment, you think you're going crazy because you got two guys here who see the same thing, 2-on-1, the Council of Men. And when it's only you and your spouse, and they constantly are changing stories and lying to you, you genuinely think you're going nuts. And it really does take a hold of your sanity. You begin questioning everything that goes on around you.
Especially like when you're in a marriage, because if you don't have time to, like, you know, come into your own space and be able to think and heal from the outside and think for yourself, it can be even more difficult to, you know, break out of it. And what I find, especially people I've interviewed in the past, especially that have been in marriages with narcissists, I think it's even more difficult to break away, because at the end of the day, you're in a covenant, you know, with you know, being in a marriage. But yeah, really powerful stuff there, really powerful stuff.
Yeah. I can tell you to this day, I still love her, and I'm not trauma bonded to her. I don't want to return to her.
Yeah.
And I can't go back to that abuse, and I can't go back to living suicidally. But I have genuine love for her, and divorce was excruciating, because you're right. It is a covenant you make. The two shall become one. And walking away from that, particularly in my situation as a pastor, was just excruciating. It literally took me 25 years to even get to the point where I could even consider walking away. So it's quite a ride, particularly for people of faith. I think it's very hard to walk away from a situation like that.
It's a kind of pain that, you know, you wouldn't even wish on your enemy, because I spoke that really,
many times.
Yeah, I mean, people go about physical pain and stuff, and that's painful in itself. But I believe mental pain is also should have just as much attention, you know, because
without question,
it could cost your life. It could cost your life as well.
And it's a pain that doesn't stop either.
Yeah.
You get to this place where I was in this situation, and you go, this will be my life every day from here forward. It will not change. I've run this hamster wheel of deception with her, and it will continue to be this, with the stories changing every single day of my life. And I don't know if I can do that. And it feels like a waste. You know, you pour emotional energy in this, into this person, hoping that they become a better person. And narcissists don't become better people; they become worse people. When you embrace the truth, as you hope that most people do in their lives, they want more truth daily instead of less truth. And if you want more truth daily, you tend to become a better person. In Christian circles, we call that more godliness. You become more godly.
Yeah.
But if you embrace deception more daily, even in the small things, you become more deceptive. You don't become a better human being.
Yeah.
And in time, she was far more difficult than better.
I mean, it's clear, as a famous man once said, the truth would set you free. So
absolutely,
that's the most key thing. And this leads me on to a point in terms of maybe the descriptions or the ways that female covert narcissists might, you know, try to, you know, control their victims. I believe one that we should talk about is sex, basically. And we as men, we're attracted to what we see, moved by that. And I believe that could be a very powerful kind of tool that can be used to like control men and,
Absolutely.
So I don't know if you want to term it as the spirit of Jezebel or something to like kind of like hook the man in. I mean, in contrast, a male, I mean, for the purpose of this is for females, but a male might use charming, sweet words or even lie from it to try and reel the woman in. But in terms of men, I believe it could be sex. I don't know if there's anything you want to expand on that, maybe.
Yeah, when we talk about the spirit of Jezebel, oftentimes we're talking about a woman who is quite wayward and promiscuous. We should probably, clarify that for your listeners, right? And my situation was she was just as controlling through sex, but it was the exact opposite. Prior to marriage, she wanted to be very physically involved. I was committed to, in fact, we were both committed to sexual abstinence before marriage and managed to achieve that. But she was, at the same time, a very physical person. We had a very physical kind of relationship in terms of kissing and physical touch, although it was not crossing into not too far into the sexual, because again, we were both committed to that. And once we were married and there's freedom to go pursue a sexual relationship, she was just not interested. And I found her controlling and manipulating me through that the entire way through our marriage. So it was kind of the opposite, I think, of many narcissists, where they have women who are off the hook sexually and cheating on their spouses and those kinds of things. I was never able to identify that my ex was cheating physically on me. But she had at least one situation where she was unquestionably cheating emotionally on me by her own admission. And quite honestly, again, she admitted it in what I thought was the best day of our marriage, because it was the most truthful thing I'd ever heard from her. And then 2 days later, she said, "I don't know what you're talking about. That never happened." So,
that level of transparency can at least, try to give some sort of like false hope, in the sense that, okay.
That is exactly what I thought. I thought, okay, if she can confess this to me, that she had an emotional obsession with another man, then we can talk about anything. I thought this was a new level for us. And what it was a new level of deception, ultimately. To this day, and this is now, let's see, that was 12 years ago. To this day, she'll, if it's mentioned, she'll go, "I didn't do anything wrong. I did everything right."
Yeah.
And that's her description of the event. But back to the sexual, mine tried to control the relationship through sex. And I think being younger, I was probably more easily manipulated. And then as I got older and found the emptiness in it, because she was just not present, and we were starting to have these conversations, and I felt like I was being manipulated. She just stopped. And perhaps, again, coverts may in some respects respond a little bit differently to malignant narcissists, where they may be very pious, they may be very religious. And what takes place behind the scenes is a different kind of manipulation, perhaps the same spirit, brother, as well, manifest in a different way in the marriage. And that was my particular experience. Now I've spent enough time with men and having conversations with them and working them through some of this to know that there are a ton of men who ultimately just get cheated on. Their wives are sexually off the hook and off the chain, and outliving a life and that is quite sexually promiscuous, and that's very common. That's very common for men to discover.
Yeah, and just even touch on that point of the emotional cheating, which, I mean, that's another debate in itself, because some people might think that emotional cheating is not cheating if it's not physical, and maybe one is worse than the other. At the end of the day, in my opinion, cheating is cheating, whether it's emotional.
No question.
And in
No
a
question.
yeah, exactly. So in a relatable way, even from past experiences, that emotional cheating that you said you thought that level of transparency was, and you found in a relatable way for people to also learn. It's like if someone is being transparent like that, but you now discover there's some things that have been omitted to give you the full picture of the truth relating to that 99%
Correct.
that you put there. That is still
and you wind up realizing that you'll never know the truth.
yeah.
That no, I may have had one piece of it, you know, and that hole could be as it seems, or that hole could be so unbearably deep I don't even want to go look at it, because their language and their words are so deceptive and consistently deceptive. You just genuinely don't know. You just genuinely don't know whatever really happened or transpired.
Yeah, definitely. It's a very it can be very even painful for men, because men, like, well, men have egos, and they probably wouldn't even want to talk about it with someone. I know you want to talk about it with their friends, you know, because what worse thing for a for a man, you know, to talk about
the most hurtful. It's the most hurtful way.
Yeah.
Interestingly enough, you know, some of the narcissists do cheat physically, but ultimately, you know, my perspective on it is kind of a little different. One of the things I would consistently say to my ex was this. I said, there is no room in your life for anybody but you. And ultimately, they are their own lovers in some respects, emotionally. That the cheating that takes place is actually with themselves, and everything is designed for their own self-pleasure.
Wow.
It's in some respects, I call it mental masturbation. Everything is designed, everything in their life is designed for their own self-pleasure. And they are, you know, the cheating that takes place ultimately for me was actually never loving me and constantly loving self first, more than anything else. And she may or may not have cheated on me. Like I said, I'll never know whether she cheated physically with another person. Cheating emotionally was enough, and never making it right was enough. But ultimately, she is her own lover in that respect. And she is the center of her own world, and that will take place no matter what relationship romantically she's in the days ahead. And narcissists are like that. They love themselves above all else.
I'll definitely have to agree with that. And in terms of like other attributes that might come with a female covert narcissist, know if maybe you can expand on maybe like passive aggression.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Okay. In terms of like perhaps entitlement, desire to seek revenge, silent treatment, blame shaming, you know, or blame shifting, so to speak.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it seems like maybe you've had an experience of that. You want to expand on that?
Yeah. My ex would call herself the queen of passive aggressive. That was one of her own, again, admissions, that was her mantra, and everything was very, very under the radar. She would get away with these things. And I think for me, the most notable was actually with the children. Instead of having a relationship that a typical narcissist mother might have with their kids, particularly a malignant narcissist, she was constantly manipulating my situation with her in front of the children, and it was constant and passive disrespect. And I discovered this far too late, I have to tell you. This is one of the things that most hurt my relationship with my kids, but is very, very passive aggressive. It's under the radar. It's little things day in and day out that people don't realize are taking place, but are actually taking place. And it cost me a lot with my kids, because I didn't figure out that she was talking about our private marital conversations with the children, of course, with her spin. I refused to have those conversations with my kids because it wasn't any of their business. And I also, again, didn't want to disrespect their mother to them. So I felt like those were the kinds of things that should be kept between us. But what I discovered along the way, particularly towards the end, was that these kinds of conversations were very quietly being had for decades. And it's a very passive kind of disrespect. It's a very passive kind of manipulation of the people around you. It takes place with your friends. It takes place with your family. I can tell you with certainty too, in truth, that my parents have been duped, and they think they think she hung the moon. And even when I tell them the truth, it sounds so outlandish that they don't believe me. When I tell them, she pretended she had cancer, that no, surely not. That couldn't have happened. Not her, because their perception of her is again this wonderful, bubbly, charming person. But they spend their time passive aggressively in persona management with the rest of the world. And they judge themselves by how the rest of the world sees them. So not only are they deceiving the rest of the world, but they're taking their cues from the rest of the world in perception and morality. And if the world sees them good, then they see themselves favorably. And if the world doesn't see them good, they'll find somebody new to go dupe until they're feeling good about themselves.
Yeah, they need the support. They need the narcissist.
They do.
Yeah, definitely.
Absolutely. So with coverts, you have this constant undercurrent of maligning. You have this constant undercurrent of disrespect. And it is kind of frog in the kettle. First you kind of don't realize it, and then wait a minute, you get it one day that the water is boiling and that you're the frog, and which is a horrible realization. And these things come over, if you're in a relationship with a narcissist for years, these things come over years. I first really realized it when I told my ex that I wanted a divorce, and I was having a conversation with my children. And what I was hearing back from them were private marital conversations with her spin to my children, some that were years and years old. And I realized that this kind of disrespect, this kind of passive aggressive had been taking place for years, so that she could manipulate the children into relationship with her and manipulate them away from me. And one of the other things we should probably talk about, narcissists are very good at doing as part of this process, is they try to control all of the conversation that comes to you. So what was taking place is she was having these conversations and creating distrust with me, was the children started to distrust me, and I could never figure that out. And I figured out too late. Instead of having a conversation with me directly, they would have a conversation with her, and then she would tell me. And they use this kind of triangulation where all of the conversation flows through them to you, whether it's through, and I had this with my extended family, my sisters. I had this with my parents and also with my children, and did not realize it was going on, this passive aggressive behavior, until it was too late.
Children would be flying monkeys in that situation. Yeah. Wow.
Absolutely. In my situation, my children are her supply.
Yeah. Wow. That's another perspective entirely in itself. That's very deep. And
I also suspect that women are probably more often coverts than men. Doesn't mean that it can't happen, that a man can't be a covert narcissist.
Right.
But from my experience, that women are more often concerned about their own persona and persona management. So I think that women are probably more apt to be coverts in my experience. And from there's quite a community of and knowledgeable, by the way, knowledgeable group of people on Instagram where you and I, of course, met. And the women would agree
Yeah.
that they think they would, the women who spend their time trying to help people with narcissistic abuse would also agree and say, by and large, women tend to be more coverts and men are probably more malignant narcissists.
Yeah, that would make sense. That would make sense in terms of even just biological nature of
Yep.
both genders. But yeah, that's very insightful. And just even on maybe some final points on that I think are worth discussing as well is the something where I thought about okay, fine, the empaths or we empaths are the ones who show empathy. But what about when a narcissist is showing false empathy? I think that's a topic in itself. And also, perhaps, in my sense, I don't know if you can expand on it, maybe the false empathy is being used to gain some sort of approval, as in, to gain something back. It's not a genuine, empathy, that comes, from spirit. So I don't know if you can expand on that.
Sure. Again, I think that's another tool. This fake empathy is another tool in their arsenal of tactics, particularly with the public. In persona management, they're constantly trying to manage their persona publicly, and they could care less about it privately, more often than not. So if it benefits them to go look empathetic in a situation, and perhaps also this takes place a lot, and I would say it probably took place in my situation during the love bombing stage, where the love bombing stage, for your listeners, is generally the first stage you kind of meet a narcissist. What they tend to do is they tend to reflect back your personality to you. They almost absorb your personality. So you think you've met somebody who might be a soulmate, who you connect with deeply, who might be very empathetic, and they have this fake empathy, and you think you found your perfect mate.
Yeah.
And this is where I was probably most duped through fake empathy. In fact, when I first met her, I was very sick at the time, and she seemed to come across as very, very empathetic. And as time went on, generally speaking, the love bombing phase ends as soon as they realize that they've hooked you, and whatever empathy I had seen in her character just evaporated. Wow. To the point where I was having conversations with her that were, empathy was just not even an option. Compassion, not an option. Understanding, not an option. Concern, not an option at all, like not on the table. So that fake empathy, again, persona management. Initially for them, they're trying to manage their persona in front of you during the love bombing phase. So you might very well see that up front a lot, personally, so that they hook you, and then from there on, afterwards, you probably see it more in public arenas that will make them look appealing to pastors, friends, people in authority. They love the attention of people in authority. Because it gives them a sense of power and a sense of entitlement, and they think that they're worthy. So they're constantly trying to impress the people around them. And if fake empathy will do it, they will bring it to the table.
Wow, that's another very, I think, very dangerous one to be aware of, and to have that kind of like intuition and not ignoring that voice that's within you, to know that that something's like wrong here and everything, and just being aware and just trying to protect yourself mentally as well. And I think also finally, like the sense of this vengeful spirit or holding grudges for a while, perhaps another way to describe the covert female narcissist. I don't know if you have any experiences on that, and also like their proneness to depression as well.
Interestingly enough, one of the things, in fact, this is kind of how I contextualized divorce with her. one of the things I said to her was that, we've been married for 27 years, and I can't remember a single conversation where we were able to resolve something. Not one. I couldn't think of one. And that's a long time to go on with unresolved conflict.
It's deep.
And if you try to resolve conflict, even if you think conflict might have been resolved, anything from the past can be surfaced and used against you in that situation. In fact, everything from the past that they can think of will be surfaced and used against you. There is no forgiveness. There's only pretending. So from a spiritual perspective, they don't go to the Lord with their problems so much as they do pretend them away and then call it faith. And there's a distinct difference between the two. When you have an issue, and if you're a spiritual person or a person of faith, you go to God with your issue, like the disciples on the water at one point in time. There's this storm all around them, and they're all freaked out, and they go to Jesus and they say, "We're going to die." And he's like, "You guys just kind of settle down a little bit. You don't have any faith." And he kind of snaps his fingers proverbially, and the storm is gone. And going to God with a problem is one thing, but sitting at the edge of the boat while the waves crash over top of you, going, "There is no storm, there is no storm, there is no storm," is not faith. And these things are not resolved. Nothing is ever resolved. And at any given time, conflict from the past can and will be brought up and used against you, because even if you thought it was resolved, it was never resolved on their part. They don't let go of these things. They just try to pretend them away. And when new conflict surfaces, they will bring it up to draw attention back to themselves, to make themselves look like the victim, and make you out to be the bad guy. That will happen consistently.
Especially recognizing the fake apology as well. That's very important. I always talk about that point, because there is a science to an apology and a genuine one. So if you're saying stuff, you're not feeling that apology, there's probably a reason why, because that's genuine. So
and you have to trust your gut. One of the mechanisms, as we kind of talked about with the sanity, your gut winds up being, you feel like your gut is untrustworthy. And if you're in a relationship with a narcissist, you really do need to trust your gut in those particular situations. If you have a fake apology and you don't feel remorse, and it's feelings are in some respects subjective, but you should be able to feel somebody's remorse when they're apologetic. And if you don't feel it, there's a problem. And those are the kinds of things I would address. Do you feel sorry? No, I don't feel sorry. Well, why are you telling me why are you apologizing if you don't feel sorry? Well, maybe that's the thing I should do, right? I should apologize, as though somebody told her to go do it, but there's no remorse in it whatsoever. So it's pretending over all things.
Yeah.
And the fakeness, whether it's fake apology or constantly holding grudges, they don't ever move beyond those things emotionally. They don't understand forgiveness. They can't give forgiveness. They're only
moving forward with their lives, like spiritually, and things coming into their lives in terms of progress. Going in this hateful cycle.
Yeah. And all at the time, because they're pretending it away, calling it faith, perhaps even when it's not. It's not faith. It's not childlike faith. It is childish faith, if there is any at all.
Yeah.
And there's a distinct difference between the two. So this kind of this lack of ability to go really deal with most any kind of emotional conflict will result in grudges constantly being held. I mean, years and decades later. Decades later. So if something comes up and you try to address it, they might pull something out from 10 or 15 years ago that has not since been talked about, that you thought was resolved or not an issue, a decade and a half ago, and then suddenly this is on the table as well, which confuses the current or existing situation and makes it unresolvable too.
That's very profound. And finally, John, would you say like there's a proneness to depression in terms of like the energy that's extracted from you in terms of trying to like help them or lift them up from certain situations? Yeah.
I can only speak for myself in this, and
Sure.
those I've encountered. That I mean, depression is almost a given in this situation for anybody who might be a victim of a narcissist or abused. And let me say this also, because we're talking largely about how men process this. I spent some time with a lady named Dr. Retha Stewart, who's doing also on Instagram, by the way, and is working on a paper, a master's or a doctorate level paper on domestic violence, and particularly as men see it. And something surfaced in the conversation that I think is really important. Men do not identify well with the word abuse. We do not identify well with the word victimization. In fact, my Instagram account is called Male Victims of Female Narcissists. And I tried to find another word other than victims, because we hate to see ourselves as victims. We hate to see ourselves as abused, and we're not. Although it could be happening to us, men don't identify with those concepts easily, because it paints a picture in our minds of weakness. So the one thing I think that as men, and if somebody's listening out there to something like this and going, well, I'm not abused, I have a hard time identifying with that term myself still, but there is a term that I can identify with, and I think men do identify with, and it is constant cruelty. It is unmerited cruelty. Cruelty is the word that probably will help men more understand the narcissist in their lives, if there is one. They are constantly, somebody's constantly being, their spouse or their significant other is constantly being cruel to them, and that might be a more helpful way for them to understand that they really are being victimized, they are being abused.
I really appreciate that, John. I really appreciate that. And just to close off, how would you advise maybe certain men going through this that might be listening, how to like come out of this, or any words of advice, any guidance, for them?
I do have some guidance, and some of this is going to be hard to say. I think I can tell your listeners that that one, I did choose a path of divorce, even though I don't believe in it. And it genuinely took me decades to get to that point. Part of my faith journey is also being optimistic and believing that God can heal and that God can change anybody along the way. And narcissists are aware enough of their behavior that they have the ability to go change just like anybody else. So they're not immune from change. The only thing is they don't want to, and they are in some respects lying and denial addicts. They live in a constant state of denial. So I was constantly and living in this, well, things are going to be better tomorrow, things are going to be better tomorrow, and ultimately wore out of that and became so depressed I really did want to take my own life. And that wasn't just a day, that was over a period of years. I was that depressed and suicidal, thinking, okay, this is going to be better, there'll be a happily ever after. And ultimately, I have to tell your listeners that by and large, narcissists don't get better. They get worse.
Harsh reality.
And it's hard to say that, and I have a hard time speaking it, because I like to believe differently. I like to believe that anybody has the capacity to change. But if you don't think you have a problem, you never change.
That's it.
And
that's it. And I've had other guests say the same thing, on the channel too. So
Jesus came to heal the sick. But if you don't ever want to admit you're sick, you don't ever get healed. If you've got COVID and you don't go to the doctor, you don't get help. It's that simple. And I had to get to this place where I realized, and you realize in this that there's no conversation that you can have that will make this better with that person. That this is going to go the way it's going to go. And there is no way for you to intercept it. And I took my ex to therapists. I took her to narcissist therapists. I took her to therapists specializing in women. I took her to a kind of demonic exercise through the church that would cast out demons. And I was desperate for change. Yeah. And I turned over every stone I absolutely know to turn over as a human being, as a husband, as a pastor, as a man. I turned over every one I knew to turn over, and she still got worse.
Relatable what you're saying, yeah.
And you have to realize that there are some things in life that cannot be fixed. And if she's going to be fixed, it will be because she has a personal revelation of some sort, which in my estimation would require a direct act of God and a miracle in order for something like that to take place. And the truth is, it's been, I might still not believe it in her. It's been so bad that happened.
Yeah,
but
I know what you mean. Yeah,
but you get to the place where you realize that I cannot fix this, and you need to relieve yourself of the burden of fixing it, and you need to start taking care of yourself. Which, if you're in a relationship or in a marriage, particularly, feels counterintuitive to what you're used to. Because when you get married, you go, okay, I've given up me, and I've taken on us. And I had to go back to personally taking care of me because I was in such a bad place.
Yeah.
And I was having conversations with her about this constantly, trying to help her. My therapist told me something one day. She goes, "Let me ask you a question." She goes, "Why are you having these conversations?" I'm like, "Well, it's my job as a Christian man to go help my spouse grow. And if the house is burning, I should tell her the house is on fire." And she said, "All right, I got a question for you." She said, "Can you point to one conversation? I'm just asking you for one in the last couple of decades. Can you point to a single conversation that has helped?" And I sat there in absolute silence. And I said, "Not one. I can't think of a single conversation that's helped." And she goes, "Well, then why are you having these conversations? You cannot fix her. This is personality disorder. This is something the DSM-5 talks about, cluster B personality disorder. There's a reason for this. And you are not going to be able to bring her where she needs to go. And you need to realize that. So stop trying to fix her." And that would be my advice to your listeners. Stop trying to fix her.
Yeah.
Stop trying to fix them. You cannot fix them.
Focus.
They are not going to be fixed.
Yeah.
So you have to take care of yourself first. You'll have to set boundaries, what you will and will not accept. In some situations, you need to get out of the house. If there's physical violence against you, I'm going to tell you that you need to get out of the house in some capacity, man or woman. Yeah. If you can get out and go stay with somebody else, you need to get to a place where you're safe. Yeah.
Because violence does happen to men as well. It might be hard to believe, but it can happen to men, domestic violence.
Oh my gosh, yes. In fact, I got to tell you something. That's the big shock in getting into this with men and trying to help them heal, is how many men have had domestic violence, have had physical violence against them from a woman. And even as I've talked to men who are in seemingly good relationships whose wives are not narcissistic, you'd be shocked. You'd be absolutely shocked at the number of men who've taken a punch from a woman. Where if tables were turned, we'd be in jail for that one punch. And somehow it seems acceptable for a woman to go hit a man, but it's not acceptable for a man to hit a woman. Yeah. And we take it.
It's a double standard of society, isn't it?
Oh my gosh, it is, absolutely. And and even if a man gets hit by a woman, don't you ever call the police. Don't call the authorities, because they won't believe you. and they don't believe you. So, you know, there's no place to go.
Yeah.
Other than perhaps close friends who might believe you and trust you in a situation like that. So my advice would be to realize that, you know, to summarize, it's there is no relationship. You didn't have one with a narcissist. You won't have one with a narcissist.
John, sorry to cut up, but even just saying that in itself is easy to say, but that's very hard to accept. That they have to get.
Oh my gosh, it is horrific.
That there wasn't a relationship. They have to get to that understanding that there was no relationship.
There was no relationship. And if you're married, you're going, wait a minute, this person pretended. Is the covenant I made with this person valid? Am I really married? Yeah. I had a piece of paper that said I was married. I had rings, but there are people who exchange rings all the time and are not married. I had a house with this person, but there are people who have a house that are not married. I had children with this person, but there are people who have children together who are not married. So what qualifies a marriage? There's a qualitative relationship that is at the center of all of that. And the rings and the marriage certificate and the kids and the house all are supposed to come out of that relationship. But you realize one day that you not only do you not have a relationship with that person, it hasn't just gone south. Yeah. But you never had one. You never had a relationship. They never loved you.
Difficult to hear, but it's something people are gonna have to accept if they want to move forward. Yeah.
Maybe also, you know, I want to share with your folks the closing words I had with my ex, because I want them to understand this.
Yeah.
I was, again, eternally optimistic, even in some respects, as I prayed over the last 2 years, and I spent basically 2 years praying before I left. And I felt like God was very clear with me through prayer, saying, if she had any insight, those last 2 years, I'd taken the holds off. I wasn't having conversations about her behavior. I thought, okay, she needs to check herself. The conversations I'd had were not working, and I felt like God was saying, you release this, and during these 2 years, she needs to discover for herself that she has a problem. And if she doesn't discover for herself that she has a problem, then there's no path forward. So after 2 years, we had what ultimately wound up being our final conversation. And in her conversation, she said, so what was the final straw? And I said, well, you pretended you had cancer. And she goes, well, you know, and started to gaslight me. And I'm like, we're not doing this here. You did it. You did that. And I trust my mind. I know what happened. And she wanted to work out the relationship, which who wouldn't? I mean, I'm paying all the bills, and I've given her stature in the community, and I've given her children. You know, she has everything she wants from me. Yeah. And I said to her, I asked her 2 questions. I said, and I was ready to come back if I felt like I understood that she had any understanding, even a little glimmer of understanding that she had a problem. If she'd stepped forward and said, look, I understand I got a problem right here that I need to have worked out, and I understand it's also destroying our marriage. Will you put this on pause? Will you put this on pause while I get help, and you can be a part of that process? And I would have done that. But I asked her this question. I said, if I return to you, if I come back, will you be emotionally present, emotionally available, and emotionally engaged in the relationship? She goes, no, I'm not saying that. And I said, so if I come back, will you stop pretending and lying and making up stories and stuff like that? She goes, no, I'm not saying that either.
Oh my God.
And in that moment, you realize that, one, you never had a relationship with a person, and they have no intention of having one with you. That they are using you for what you bring to the table, but they are not interested in you as a person. And then the second thing you realize is that they're going to continue to do this. There is a level of awareness. When she said to me, okay, you know what? And when she didn't challenge the fact that she was lying, if she weren't lying, she'd go, oh, well, I'm not a liar. I don't do this. I don't do that. She says, no, I'm not going to stop. So there's an awareness of what's taking place as well. There's an awareness of what they're doing, and they have no intention of stopping. So for me, the solution was to get out of the relationship. If one of your listeners is in a relationship and they're not married, I would tell you to leave immediately. I can give you that advice. If you're married, you need to find your own way through this. And my solution was to leave, even though I don't believe in leaving.
Yeah.
And if that means anything to you, after a career and a lifetime in ministry and having these core beliefs in my own being for, again, my entire life, having to go against that if that means anything to you, I had to go do that just to protect myself. Exactly. And to save myself. Ultimately, only one person is going to be saved. And they're either going to take you with them and take you down with them, or perhaps you can get off the Titanic and leave. And that's what I chose to do. And it takes two people to make a good marriage, but only one to make a bad one.
Yeah. That's a deep statement in itself. That's a deep statement. And I just want to thank you so much, Jon, for
my pleasure
insight on that. I believe this is very powerful. This, is going to touch a lot of men's lives when it comes to this. And
thank you.
I just want to also say that, perhaps in future, we can also welcome you onto the show to discuss other topics in more detail as well.
Yeah.
And
I would be happy to do that. If people want to reach out, they can find me on Instagram.
Yeah.
My nick on Instagram is Male Victims of Female Narcissists.
Yeah.
And I also hold that same website name, malecvictimsoffemalenarcissist.com. At some point in time, there's a book that'll talk about my story and how I navigated this and discovered what was taking place. It's in the process of being edited right now. But if any of your folks want to connect with me, that's where they can find me.
Well, what I'll do is I'll put a link as well down to your pages as well if they want to.
That'd be great.
More for that, just to also help men as well that might be going through something similar. So thank you so much for your insight.
Very good. Thank you for having me today. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Yeah, I really have. It's been impactful and very, very, very powerful. And I think it's going to help a lot of people. And I just want to thank you so much for that, Jon.
My pleasure. Thank you, sir.
Brilliant. Hi guys, hope we received a lot of value with that episode. I believe that was really necessary and a really powerful interview with Jon. I think also that it's going to also impact a lot of people that are probably possibly going through this form of abuse. And also just please like, comment and subscribe as usual. Share with as many people as possible. You do not know who might be going through this and they're not speaking out. It might actually save some people's lives. People go through this sort of abuse in marriages sometimes for 20 years, a whole lifetime, and you can save them a lot of heartache with just this knowledge. Knowledge is power, and I just like to end it on the truth will always set you free. So thank you so much, and stay tuned for future episodes on the Renewed Minds. Thank you and peace out.